Eleanor Reed wasn't supposed to be in that courtyard. She was a servant. A disgraced doctor's daughter. A girl whose name folks whispered behind cupped hands. But when that black mare tore loose in the lightning, and 14 highborn brides screamed and ran for the doors, Eleanor walked straight into the rain. She didn't flinch. She didn't weep. From his window upstairs, Nathaniel Whitmore, the wounded soldier who'd refused every woman his aunt paraded before him, set down his glass, leaned forward, and whispered the one word that would shatter Whitmore Hall forever. Her. Before this story carries you any further, friend, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss a single chapter of what's coming. Stay with me till the very last word, and drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from tonight. I love seeing just how far this story has traveled. The thunder split the sky over Whitmore Hall, and the black mare tore through the stable gate like the devil himself was after her. "Lord above!" cried Miss Hattie Pierce, pressing herself flat against the parlor window. "She's gonna kill somebody." "Where are the grooms?" Vivien Hawthorne demanded, her hand clenched white around her fan. "Margaret, where are your grooms?" "They're trying," Margaret Whitmore said, but her own face had gone tight. "John Tucker's out there. He's just a boy." "A boy ain't gonna stop that horse, ma'am," whispered a slim, red-haired girl named Lottie Vance. "Look at her. She's mad with fear." In the courtyard, the boy, John Tucker, held the rope with both hands and shook so hard the rope shook with him. Lightning struck the elm by the carriage house. The mare reared. John dropped to his knees in the mud. "Get back, child," someone shouted from the stable. But John couldn't move. His feet had forgotten how. The brides at the window pressed closer. None of them in 14 lifetimes between them had ever set foot in a wet courtyard wearing anything but slippers. None of them moved. Eleanor Reed had been folding linen by the kitchen passage when the first scream cut through the house. She set the linen down. She untied her apron and laid it on the stool. She did not call for anyone. "Miss Eleanor!" Abby Turner caught her at the servant's door, the small kitchen maid's eyes white-rimmed in the lightning. "Don't you dare go out there. That mare'll trample you to ribbons." "Where's Mr. Tucker?" "He's the one needs savin'. Miss, please." "How old is John?" 14, ma'am." "Then he's a child, Abby." Eleanor reached past her for the latch. "Tell Miss Clara I'll be back directly. Don't tell her where I went." "Miss Eleanor?" "Don't tell her, Abby." She stepped out into the rain. The cold hit her like a slap. Her cap was gone in 2 strides. Her plain brown cloak went heavy with water before she'd reached the courtyard stones. She didn't look up at the windows. She didn't think about the 14 pairs of eyes watching from inside. She walked in a straight line toward the boy on his knees. "John?" He didn't hear her over the storm. "John Tucker, look at me." The boy turned his head. His face was wet with rain and tears both. "Miss, she's gonna kill me, miss, I can't." "You're gonna give me the rope and you're gonna walk backward toward the stable. Don't run, don't turn. Just walk back slow as Sunday." "Miss." "The rope, John. Now." He pressed it into her hand. The mare's eye rolled white. "Walk, John. Walk." The boy walked. Eleanor turned her body sideways to the horse the way her father had once shown her with a barn cat that hadn't been touched in a year. She did not raise her voice. She did not raise her arm. "Easy, girl. Easy now. That thunder ain't coming for you. It's just noise and light." The mare snorted. Her hooves struck sparks. "I know," Eleanor said, soft as a hymn. "I know, sweet thing. The world feels like it's endin', but it ain't. Look at me, girl. Look, I'm right here." She let the rope go slack in her hand. Pullin' her father had said once is for fools and butchers. The mare circled her. Once. Twice. The 3rd time the horse's head came down by an inch. "There you are. There. You ain't alone, sweet thing. You ain't alone." Up at the 2nd floor window of the east wing, Nathaniel Whitmore set down the glass of brandy he had not been drinking. "Aunt Margaret," he said. But Aunt Margaret was downstairs calming the brides. He spoke to no one. "Aunt Margaret." "Who is that woman?" The mare's nose touched Eleanor's open palm. Good girl, good girl. Let's get you home. She walked the mare back to the stable, slow and steady, the rope loose between them. At the stable door, she handed it to John, who had stopped shaken enough to take it. You did well, son. Miss, I dropped it. I dropped the rope. You handed it to somebody who could carry it. That ain't dropping, John. That's wisdom. The boy stared at her like she'd come down out of heaven. What's your name, miss? I never seen you before. Eleanor Reed. I'm Miss Bellamy's companion. Don't mention me to anyone, John. Especially not the ladies inside. Promise me. Yes, miss. Yes, ma'am. I promise, ma'am. She turned back into the rain and walked toward the servants' door, head down the same straight line she'd come. Behind her, 14 brides at the window forgot how to breathe. Who in the Lord's name was that? Whispered Miss Hattie Pierce. Nobody, Vivien Hawthorne said. Nobody don't tame a mad horse like that, Vivien. She's a servant. Look at her cloak. Look at her shoes. Servants don't walk into thunder for grooms' boys, Vivien. I've been raised among servants my whole life and I never seen one do that. Then she's a fool. Or she's something else entirely, Lottie Vance said quietly. Vivien turned away from the window. She's nothing. Stop staring like a herd of sheep. Mr. Whitmore is meant to come down for supper in an hour, and I won't have us looking soaked through and mussed when he does. But Lottie Vance kept staring. So did Hattie. So did the others. And Margaret Whitmore behind them watched her brides watch in the rain, and her old shrewd eyes narrowed. Hetty, Margaret said, not turning. Fine, Nathaniel. Tell him supper's at 8, and I'd like a word before. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. The girl hurried off. Margaret stayed at the window a moment longer. The courtyard was empty now. The mare was back in her stall. The boy John Tucker was crouched against the stable wall, with his hands over his face, weepin' the way only the saved weep. Lord, Margaret murmured. Lord above. Upstairs, Nathaniel was already on his feet when his aunt reached his study. Margaret, the woman in the courtyard, who is she? Sit down, Nathaniel. Who is she? Sit down. He sat. He hadn't sat down at his aunt's command since he was 12 years old, but he sat. Margaret closed the door behind her. How many of the 14 have you spoken with today? All of them. And they are exactly what you said they would be. Polite, educated, pleasant, empty. Nathaniel. Don't, Margaret. They are not empty, you are. He flinched. He wasn't a man who flinched. The war had broken many things in him, but it had also taught him to keep his face still as a stone wall. And yet at his aunt's words, something in his jaw moved. That's a hard thing to say to a man. It's a true thing. And I love you enough to say it. She crossed the room and sat across from him. I have brought 14 of the finest young women in 3 states under this roof. I have done it because your father's house cannot stand without an heir, and because you cannot stand much longer the way you're standing now. Margaret. Do not Margaret me, boy. I held you when you were 2 days old. I buried your mother. I buried your father. I will not bury you while you're still walking around in your own skin pretending you're alive. I am alive. You are a ghost in good boots, Nathaniel. You drink without tasting it. You sleep with your eyes open. You came home from that frontier, and you brought the war into this house, and you've been hosting it at every supper for 2 years. He didn't answer. He looked at the brandy he hadn't drunk. Margaret leaned forward. Now, who is the woman in the courtyard? I don't know. You're lying. I don't know, Margaret. I watched her from the window. I watched the bride scream and run. I watched John Tucker fall to his knees. And I watched a woman I have never seen in my life walk out of my own house into a thunderstorm and put her hand on a horse that would have killed any of those 14. What do you feel about that, Nathaniel? Don't tell me you don't know. You do know. Tell me. He was quiet a long while. The rain hit the window in sheets. I felt like a man who has been asleep, he said finally, and just heard a voice in another room. Margaret sat back. She closed her eyes for a moment. Lord help us, she said. Margaret. Lord help us all. Who is she? I don't know yet, but I will. Find out tonight. Nathaniel. Tonight, Margaret, before supper. You'll come down to supper anyway. You'll sit with the 14. You'll be civil. I'll come, and you will not say a word about that woman to a soul. Not one soul. Do you hear me? Vivien Hawthorne is in this house. Her brother Silas is half a day's ride away, and he writes her every other afternoon. You breathe one wrong word, and that girl in the courtyard, whoever she is, will be in pieces by Sunday. Why would Vivien? Because Vivien Hawthorne came here to win Nathaniel. She did not travel 3 days in a coach and bring 2 trunks of silk because she enjoys your aunt's company. I have given her no encouragement. You have given none of them encouragement, child, and yet half of them have written home that you've all but proposed. That's how women in their position survive. They build the future they need out of the bricks at hand. Vivien's father. Vivien's father lost most of his cotton to the bank in March. The Hawthornes have been holding on by the skin of their pride for 2 years, and Silas Hawthorne ain't the kind of brother who lets a sister come home empty-handed. You hear me, Nathaniel? She has got to win this. There's no other door open to her. He closed his eyes. Margaret, I cannot do this. You will do this. You will sit at supper. You will be a gentleman. And tomorrow, if the woman in the courtyard is who I begin to suspect she is, we will have a much harder conversation than this one. Who do you suspect she is? I'll tell you tomorrow. Margaret. Tomorrow, Nathaniel. She rose. At the door, she paused. You said you felt like a man hearing a voice in another room. Yes. Be careful, son. The last time you let yourself hear a voice like that, you followed it onto a battlefield. I know. And you came back without your friend. He didn't answer. She closed the door behind her. Down in the kitchen passage, Eleanor was wringing rainwater out of her hair into a copper basin, while Abby Turner fussed at her with a dry towel. You are going to catch your death, Miss Eleanor. You hear me? Your death. I won't. You're shaken like a leaf. I'm cold, Abby, that is all. You walked into a storm for a stable boy. He's a child. He's a stable boy, ma'am. He's a child, Abby. There's no difference between those two things at 14 years old. Abby pressed the towel into her hands. Miss Clara'll skin me if she finds out where you've been. Then don't tell her. She'll see your hair. I'll braid it. She won't notice. She'll notice your boots. Then I'll take them off before I go up. Abby studied her a long moment. The kitchen maid was barely 17 small and quick and sharper than most folks gave her credit for. Miss Eleanor. Yes, Abby. Why'd you do it? Eleanor stopped wringing her hair. Why'd I do what? Walk out there. There were 14 ladies at that window with grooms and fathers and brothers backing 'em up. None of 'em moved. You did. Why? Eleanor was quiet. Because I knew what it felt like, she said at last, to be the one nobody comes for. Abby's eyes filled. Don't, Abby. I ain't crying. Yes, you are. I ain't. Hand me the second towel. Abby handed her the second towel. They didn't speak for a while. Upstairs, Miss Clara Bellamy was perched on the edge of her bed, twisting a handkerchief between her thin fingers, when Eleanor finally came in with her hair braided tight and her boots in her hand. Eleanor? Where on earth have you been? There was the most awful commotion, a horse loose in the courtyard. Mary said she heard somebody nearly died, Eleanor. You're soaked. It's only rain, Clara. You're soaked through. I went out for air. The rain caught me. Air in a thunderstorm. It cleared my head. Eleanor Reed, you are the worst liar in 3 counties. I know. Clara stared at her. Then her face softened. Was it you, with the horse? Clara. Was it? Clara, please don't. It was you. The thin girl pressed her handkerchief to her mouth. Oh, Eleanor. Don't tell anyone. Promise me. Don't tell your aunt. Don't tell the ladies. Don't tell a soul. Why on earth not? You ought to be praised. You ought to. Because if Vivien Hawthorne hears my name in this house in any way that brings me to attention, she'll tear me to pieces by Sunday. Vivien wouldn't. Vivien would, Clara. You know she would. Clara was quiet. She knew. All right, she said softly. All right, dearest. I won't tell. Thank you. But Eleanor. Yes. What if Mr. Whitmore saw you? Eleanor turned to the basin and began washing her hands. He didn't, Clara. How do you know? Because nobody sees me. That's how I've stayed alive these 4 years. Clara watched her companion's hands move in the water. She had loved Eleanor Reed since the day her father had hired her, and she had never once, in those 18 months, seen Eleanor look at herself in a mirror longer than it took to fix her hair. Eleanor. Yes, Clara. Someday somebody's gonna see you. Eleanor's hands stilled in the water. And when they do, Clara said, I hope to God they're worthy of the seein'. Eleanor didn't answer. She picked up the towel and dried her hands and went to lay out Clara's blue silk for supper. Down the corridor in the east wing, Nathaniel Whitmore stood at his window long after the rain had stopped. He hadn't gone to dress. He hadn't poured another brandy. He hadn't done any of the things a man preparing for supper with 14 carefully chosen brides ought to be doing. He was looking at the courtyard, at the dark patch of stone where her plain brown cloak had stood. His steward, a stout man named Coleman, knocked once and entered. Sir, you sent for me. Coleman, sir. There was a woman in the courtyard tonight, during the storm. She caught the mare. Yes, sir. I saw her, sir. You saw her. From the south door, sir. Who is she, Coleman? Coleman hesitated. Sir, I'd rather Mrs. Whitmore tell you herself. Coleman. Sir, please. Coleman. Who is she? The steward closed his eyes for a long second. Her name is Eleanor Reed, sir. She's Miss Clara Bellamy's companion. She is not on the list of guests. She is not eligible. Reed. Yes, sir. Reed. From where? Sir. From where, Coleman? From over near Charlottesville, sir. Her father was a doctor, Dr. Samuel Reed. Nathaniel turned from the window. Samuel Reed? Yes, sir. The Samuel Reed who was... He stopped. The word disgraced was not a word he would say in his own house about a man he had never met. The one folks talk about. Yes, sir, that one. Coleman. Sir. Did he do what they say he did? Sir, I am not the man to ask. Coleman. I would not say yes, sir. What would you say? I would say there are a great many things in this country, sir, that a man cannot prove and cannot deny, and just has to live underneath. And his daughter has been living underneath it for 4 years. Nathaniel stood very still. Thank you, Coleman. Sir? That'll be all. Yes, sir. And Coleman. Sir. Not a word. To anyone. About this conversation. No, sir. Not a word. The steward bowed and closed the door. Nathaniel stood in the empty room. The rain had stopped completely now. Somewhere down the long corridor, 14 women were arranging their hair for supper. His aunt was at her dressing table. Vivien Hawthorne was probably already polishing her smile. And in a small attic chamber 3 floors above his head, a woman named Eleanor Reed was laying out another woman's blue silk dress. He sat down at his writing desk. He pulled a sheet of paper toward him. He dipped his pen. He wrote nothing for a long time. Finally, he set the pen down. He folded the blank paper. He slid it into the drawer. Samuel Reed's daughter, he said aloud to no one. The clock struck the half-hour. Supper would be served in 30 minutes. 14 brides would sit at his table. He would be civil. He would be charming in the small, careful way he had learned to be charming since the war. He would say nothing of the woman in the storm. He stood. He went to dress. But as he buttoned his black coat in front of the small mirror, his hand stopped just for a second at the 3rd button. He looked at his own face. The face of a man who had buried a friend in a frontier ditch and come home and not laughed once in 2 years. Samuel Reed's daughter, he said again. And then more quietly, almost as if he were afraid the house itself might overhear him, Eleanor. Supper that night was the longest meal Nathaniel Whitmore had sat through since the war. 14 brides, 14 bowls of consommé, 14 pairs of carefully practiced eyes lifted to his face every time he reached for his glass. Mr. Whitmore. Vivien Hawthorne's voice carried the way it always did, smooth as river stones. I was telling Margaret just before we came down, your mother's portrait in the front hall is the finest I've ever seen. The painter caught something very particular about her mouth. I imagine she was a woman of strong opinions. She was. You favor her, sir. So I'm told. He cut his meat. He did not look up. Down the table, Margaret Whitmore watched her nephew with the patience of a woman who had been watching men disappoint her for 50 years. Beside Margaret sat Miss Clara Bellamy, pale and small in her blue silk, her thin fingers folded in her lap like a child waiting for permission to eat. Miss Bellamy, Margaret said gently, you ain't touched your soup, child. Oh, Clara startled. Forgive me, Mrs. Whitmore. I was wool gathering. Well, gather it back. The cook'll think we don't appreciate her. Yes, ma'am. Vivien's eyes flickered toward Clara and then away, dismissing her in a single beat. Vivien had measured every woman in that house within 10 minutes of arriving, and Clara Bellamy, fragile, unwed at 26, rumored to be sickly, had not been entered into Vivien's accounting as competition. The companion did not appear at the table. The companion ate in the kitchen passage with Abby and the housemaids, a tin plate on her knees, and her braids still damp at the ends. Eleanor Reed had spent the last hour folding Clara's wet hem and brushing her hair, and pretending she had no opinions about the supper she would not be eaten. Across the table from Vivien, Miss Lottie Vance, the slim red-haired girl who had been stupider with grief than Vivien liked, had not stopped looking at Nathaniel. She wasn't looking at him the way Vivien was. Lottie was looking at him like a woman trying to read an open book in a strange language. Mr. Whitmore, Lottie said suddenly, may I ask you something direct? Lottie, Vivien murmured. You may, Miss Vance. Did you see what happened in the courtyard tonight, sir, before the storm broke proper? The fork paused a quarter-inch above Nathaniel's plate. Margaret Whitmore set her wine down very, very carefully. I saw a great deal, Miss Vance, Nathaniel said. Which part do you mean? The horse. I saw the horse. Did you see the woman who caught it? Vivien's hand closed on her napkin. I saw a woman in this courtyard, yes, Nathaniel said. His voice had gone level in the way it went level when he was lying by saying less than the truth. I do not know who she was. The rain was thick. She wasn't one of us, Lottie said. No, Miss Vance, she wasn't. She walked right into the lightning, sir. She didn't even— Lottie. Vivien's voice cracked across the table like a whip wrapped in silk. I'm sure Mr. Whitmore did not invite us to his supper to discuss the staff. Margaret, the consommé is exquisite. Whoever your cook is, you must lend her to me when I next entertain. Margaret did not blink. I'll consider it, dear. You're too kind. The conversation moved on. It moved on the way conversations move on at supper tables, full of women who have all just heard something they will think about for the rest of the night. Miss Hattie Pierce talked about Charleston. A widow's daughter named Prudence Albright talked about her mother's roses. Vivien smiled and laughed at the right moments and refilled her glass twice. But Miss Lottie Vance kept looking at Nathaniel, and Nathaniel kept eating his meat, and Margaret Whitmore kept her old shrewd eyes on Vivien Hawthorne's hand on the napkin. The hand had not unclenched once. After supper, the brides retired to the parlor. Nathaniel excused himself for his study. He did not pour brandy. He stood at the window for a long time looking down at the courtyard, and then he went to bed without a word to anyone. Upstairs in Clara's chamber, Eleanor was loosening the laces on Clara's blue silk when Clara turned and caught her hand. Eleanor. Yes, Clara. There's something I have to tell you. Lift your arms, dearest. The bodice is— Eleanor, listen to me, please. Eleanor stopped. She let her hands fall. What is it, Clara? At supper, Lottie Vance asked Mr. Whitmore about the horse. Oh, and about the woman who caught it. Eleanor sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. What did he say? He said he didn't know who she was. He said the rain was thick. Good. Eleanor, he was lying. Clara. Margaret Whitmore knew he was lying. I saw her face, and Vivien Hawthorne nearly tore her napkin in half. Clara, hush. I will not hush. Vivien knows. She doesn't know it's you, but she knows there was a woman, and she knows Mr. Whitmore is hiding it, and that woman'll have her brother on a horse before sunrise finding out who you are. Clara, you're frightening yourself. Vivien don't have any reason to. Eleanor Reed, do not stand there and tell me Vivien Hawthorne won't tear a strange woman to pieces over a man she's been promising herself to for 2 years. I have known Vivien since we were children. She broke a maid's wrist once for spilling tea on her mother's shoes. Eleanor's hands had gone cold. That can't be true. It is true. The maid was 12. Her name was Annie. The Hawthornes paid her family a quarter's wages and dismissed her without a reference. Clara, promise me you won't go down to that library tomorrow. Promise me you'll stay close to my chamber. Eat with Abby. Don't pass through the front rooms. Promise me. Clara, I work in this house. I can't hide in your chamber for a fortnight. Yes, you can. No, dearest. I can't. And if I tried, that would be the surest way to make Vivien notice me. Clara pressed both hands to her mouth. Don't cry, Clara. I'm not crying. Yes, you are. I'm just so tired of being afraid for the people I love. Eleanor took the small, thin hands in both of her own. Clara, listen to me. Yes, I have been carrying my father's name for 4 years. I have eaten at the back of houses where folks would not look at me. I have had stones thrown at our garden wall. I have had a deacon refuse me communion in his own church in front of 50 witnesses because of what folks said about my father. Do you understand me, Clara? I am not afraid of Vivien Hawthorne. Eleanor, I'm not. I have already survived worse than her. But you were never looking at a man who was looking back, Eleanor. That's different. That's new. And new things can be taken from you in ways the old ones can't. Eleanor went very still. He's not looking back, Clara. Eleanor. He's not. Eleanor Reed, I have known you for 18 months. I love you more than my own blood. And I am telling you now that man saw you in that courtyard, and he came down to supper tonight and lied to 14 women about it, and I have never in my life seen a man do a thing like that for a woman he wasn't already half a step gone over. Eleanor stood. She walked to the window. She did not answer for a long time. I'll be careful, Clara. That's not the same as a promise. It's the most I can give you. Clara closed her eyes. Down at the end of the east wing, Vivien Hawthorne was already at her writing desk in her dressing gown, the candle pulled close, her good gold pen scratching fast across the page. Brother. Come at once. Something is wrong here. There is a woman in this house who is not on Margaret Whitmore's list of guests, and Nathaniel saw her tonight in the courtyard during the storm, and he has lied to me about her at supper. I do not know her name yet. I will know it by tomorrow noon. Bring whatever Albert has on the Bellamy household and any unmarried women traveling with them. Bring it fast. Vivien. She sealed it. She rang her maid. Posey. Yes, Miss Vivien. This goes to my brother before sunrise. You'll wake the stable boy yourself. Yes, Miss Vivien. Ann Posey. Ma'am. If you mention this letter to a single soul in this house, including your own mother, I will see you dismissed without a reference, and I will write to every household between here and Charleston to make sure no one takes you. Do you understand me, girl? The maid's face went white. Yes, Miss Vivien. Good. Go. The maid went. Vivien sat for a long while at the writing desk. Then she rose, and she walked to the small mirror over her washstand, and she looked at her own face for a long, hard minute. He saw her, she said to the glass. The glass did not answer. He looked at me for 20 minutes at supper, and he did not see me at all because he was thinking about her. She pressed her palms flat against the washstand. "Whoever you are," she said quietly, "I will eat you alive." In the kitchen passage, Abby Turner was crouched by the bread oven with two of the older maids, and the older maids were telling her things she did not want to know. It was Posy Lee Child, Vivien's maid. She come down for the stable boy for midnight, said the letter had to ride before sunup. To where Mrs. Doyle? To Hawthorne Court, to her brother. Abby's stomach dropped. Oh, Lord. Whatever's in that letter, baby girl, it ain't a love poem. Mrs. Doyle, you gotta finish them rolls is what you gotta. Don't go running through this house at midnight on account of a letter. You'll wake the wrong person, and there'll be 6 of us out the door by Wednesday. But Miss Eleanor'll know in the mornin'. The letter ain't going nowhere till sunup. Sit down, child, and finish the bread. Abby sat. She finished the bread, but she did not sleep that night, not even for an hour. And at the first gray light of morning, she was already on the back stair to the 3rd floor, with a cup of tea she didn't need, and a face full of trouble she could not hide. Miss Eleanor. Eleanor was already up. She was already dressed. She was already brushing Clara's hair, which Clara had told her not to brush this morning on account of Eleanor not being a maid, and Eleanor had said hush and brushed it anyway. "Abby, come in." "Miss, outside please. I'm sorry, Miss Bellamy." Clara turned. "What is it, Abby?" "Ma'am, I just need a word with Miss Eleanor." "Tell her here, Abby. Whatever it is, she's gonna tell me anyway." Abby looked at Eleanor. Eleanor nodded once. "Miss Vivien sent a letter to her brother last night. It wrote at sunup. Mrs. Doyle heard Posy Lee come down for the stable boy. She told Posy the letter had to be on the road before mornin'." The brush stopped in Clara's hair. "Oh, Lord," Clara whispered. "Oh, Lord, oh, Lord, oh, Lord." "Eleanor, how long does it take to ride to Hawthorne Court, Abbey?" "Day and a half, ma'am. Maybe less if the roads is dry." "And back?" "Same. So 3 days, if the brother comes himself." "Yes, miss." "And he'll come himself," Clara said. "Eleanor, he'll come himself. Silas Hawthorne don't send servants for things he can do with his own hands." Eleanor set the brush down on the dressing table. She walked to the window. The morning light was thin and gray. The courtyard stones were dry. The mare was already in the paddock ears forward calm. 3 days, Eleanor said quietly. "Eleanor, that's how long I have." "To do what Eleanor—" Eleanor turned from the window. "To tell Mr. Whitmore the truth before Silas Hawthorne tells him a lie." Clara's mouth opened, closed. "You can't—" "Clara, I have to." "He don't even know your name." "He knows it. Coleman'll have told him by now." "Eleanor, that's worse. If he already knows, then he's already had a night to think about it, and he's already had the chance to decide it don't matter, and he didn't come to find you. That tells you everything." "It tells me he's a careful man, Clara. It don't tell me he don't care." "It tells you he won't." "Clara." Eleanor crossed to her and knelt by the chair and took both her hands. "Listen to me, dearest. I am not going to him to ask him for anything. Do you hear me? I am going to him because in 3 days a man named Silas Hawthorne is going to ride up to this house with a story about my father, and he is going to tell it at his sister's pretty supper table, and he is going to ruin me in front of 14 witnesses. And I have decided I will not be ruined while I am sitting on the floor with my mouth shut. I will tell my own story first, in my own voice, before any man tells it for me." Clara was crying silently. "He'll send you away, Eleanor." "He might. And then where will you go?" "I don't know." "I'll go with you." "Clara, no." "I will. I'll go. I'll tell Aunt Bellamy I want to travel. We'll go to the cousins in Boston." "Clara, your health won't—" "Hush, Eleanor, hush. Don't you tell me what my health will and won't bear. My health has borne a great deal more than anyone in this house gives it credit for, and it can bear a journey to Boston with the only friend I've got." Eleanor pressed her forehead against Clara's small, thin hands. "Thank you, Clara." "Don't thank me. Just go. Now. Right now, before you lose your nerve. Abby, go down and find out where Mr. Whitmore is." "Yes, Miss Bellamy." Abby went. She came back inside of 3 minutes with her face very pale. "He's in the library, ma'am, alone. Mr. Coleman said he ain't to be disturbed. He's been in there since 6. "Eleanor." Eleanor stood. "Tell Mr. Coleman I asked to see Mr. Whitmore on a matter of personal concern. Don't tell him my name. Just say a member of Miss Bellamy's household." "Yes, miss." "And Abby." "Ma'am, whatever happens in the next hour, you ain't seen me this morning. You understand?" "Yes, ma'am. Even if Vivien Hawthorne herself asks you, especially then." "Yes, ma'am. I never seen you, ma'am." "Good girl." The library at Whitmore Hall was the oldest room in the house. The shelves had been brought from England in 1764 by Nathaniel's grandfather, and the books on them had been read by 4 generations of Whitmores who had loved books more than they had loved most people. Nathaniel was at the long table by the south window, a ledger open in front of him, a pen in his hand, and not one mark on the paper. Coleman knocked once. "Sir, begging your pardon." Coleman. "Sir, there's a member of Miss Bellamy's household asking for a word with you, on a matter she calls personal." Nathaniel did not look up from the ledger. "What member?" "Sir?" Coleman. "It's Miss Reed, sir." Nathaniel set down the pen. He stood up. He sat down. He stood up again. "Send her in." "Sir, are you sure that's—" "Send her in, Coleman." "Yes, sir." Eleanor came through the door alone. She had not changed her dress. She had not pinched her cheeks. She had not put a ribbon in her hair. She wore the same plain gray work dress she had worn at breakfast, and her hair was in the same tight braid she had braided last night before supper. She closed the door behind her. "Mr. Whitmore?" "Miss Reed." "Thank you for seeing me." "Sit, please." "I'd rather stand, sir, if you don't mind." "As you like." He did not sit either. They stood across the long table from each other like 2 people on opposite sides of a river, deciding whether to swim. "Miss Reed." "Sir, please let me speak first. I don't have long, and what I have to say will be easier if I say it without being interrupted." "Go on." She drew a breath. "My name is Eleanor Reed. I am 24 years old. I am Miss Clara Bellamy's companion. I came to this house with her 7 days ago. I was not on your aunt's list of guests. I was in the courtyard last night during the storm. The horse was the black mare from the rear stable. The boy was John Tucker. The reason I went out was because no one else was going, and the boy was 14 years old." "Miss Reed." "Sir, please." "Yes. My father was Dr. Samuel Reed of Charlottesville. 4 years ago he was accused of causing the death of a young woman named Catherine Ashby through medical carelessness. He was not tried in any court. He was tried in his own town by his own neighbors in their kitchens and their churches and their parlors. By the time the truth came out, and the truth did come out, sir, 8 months later, in a letter from Catherine Ashby's own brother, who confessed that another member of his family had been poisoning her for the inheritance, by the time that letter came, my father was dead. He died in his own bed of grief, Mr. Whitmore, not of any illness, of grief. I have the letter. I have carried it on my person every day for 3.5 years. She reached into the small pocket sewn into her dress. She drew out a folded paper, soft and yellow at the creases. She set it on the long table between them. "Read it, sir." Nathaniel did not move. "Miss Reed." "Read it, please." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in 3 days, a man named Silas Hawthorne is going to ride into this house with a different version of this story. His sister Vivien wrote to him last night. The letter wrote at sunup. The kitchen heard. The color left Nathaniel's face. Vivien wrote to Silas. "Yes, sir." "About you. She don't know my name yet, but she will by noon." "How do you know about the letter?" "Sir." "Miss Reed." "Sir, with all respect, you're a man who runs a great house. You know how things travel through the walls of a great house. The kitchen knew before sunrise. Abby Turner told me at 6. He laughed once, short and dry, with no humor in it at all. "Abby Turner." "Yes, sir." "Abby Turner, the kitchen maid, is your spy." Abby Turner is my friend Mr. Whitmore. There's a difference. He looked at her a long moment. Yes, he said quietly. There is. She gestured toward the letter on the table. Sir, I'd like you to read it. I'd like you to read it now while I'm standing here so I can answer any question you have about it. I don't want you reading it later in the dark alone and deciding for yourself what kind of woman wrote it and what kind of father she had. I want you to look at me while you read it. He stared at her. Miss Reed. Sir, you came down here to tell me your father did not kill Catherine Ashby. I came down here to tell you my father did not kill Catherine Ashby, and to tell you I am not ashamed of him. I am not here to ask you to clear his name. I am not here to ask you to defend me at your supper table. I am not here to ask for anything, sir. I am here because I am a woman, and in 3 days a man is going to come into your house and lie about me, and I would rather you hear the truth from my own mouth in the morning light than from his at a candle-lit supper. Miss Reed. That's all, sir. Miss Reed, sit down. Sir, I'd rather... Please, sit down. She sat. He picked up the letter. He read it slowly. He did not move. He did not speak. When he was done, he folded it again along its old creases and set it back on the table between them. Miss Reed. Yes, sir. My father was accused of cheating his partners out of $40,000 in 1798. She blinked. Sir, the accusation was false. It was made by a man my father had refused to do business with on account of that man's character. The accusation traveled the way accusations travel. It cost my father 2 of his oldest friends a contract for a frigate and the respect of every man in Norfolk who had ever shaken his hand. The truth came out 4 years later when the accuser was caught cheating another man and confessed his older lies in a deathbed letter. By then my father was 61. He lived another 9 years. He never set foot in Norfolk again. He died on a porch in Virginia, looking at a field of his own corn, and the last words he said to me were, Nathaniel, do not let any man tell another man's story for him. Eleanor's hands had gone very still in her lap. Mr. Whitmore? My father's name was Henry Whitmore. I want you to know that Miss Reed, because in 3 days when Silas Hawthorne sits at my table and tries to tell me your father's story, I will have already known what it is to be the son of a man whose name was used as a weapon by men too small to fight him fair. Sir, whatever Silas Hawthorne brings to my table, Miss Reed is already worthless. She did not cry. She had decided sometime in the last 4 years that she would not cry in front of any man, and she had kept that promise to herself across a great many provocations, and she kept it now. But her shoulders dropped just an inch, like a woman putting down something she had been carrying for a long time. Thank you, sir. There is nothing to thank me for. I have not done anything. I have only listened. Sir, that is a great deal. He looked at her then. He looked at her the way he had looked at her from the upstairs window the night before. Not measuring, not weighing, just looking the way a man looks at the first clean light after a long sickness. Miss Reed. Yes, sir? Why did you go out into that storm? Sir, there were 14 women in this house with brothers and fathers and grooms behind them. My own steward was 40 feet away. My own self was at the upstairs window. Why did you go out? She was quiet a long moment. Because I knew what it felt like, sir. To what? To be the one nobody comes for. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something in his face had moved the way the face of a man who has been still for a very long time moves when something inside finally shifts. Miss Reed. Yes, sir. I would like very much to come for you. She did not answer. She could not answer. In the corridor outside the library, Vivien Hawthorne stood with her hand half raised to the door, the small folded note from her maid. Posy still warm in her palm. The companion's name is Eleanor Reed. Ma'am, the kitchen folks say. Her father was a doctor in Charlottesville, dismissed for killing a patient. And through the heavy oak panel, very faintly, she heard a man's voice say a woman's first name with no title in front of it. Vivien's fingers closed around the note. She turned. She walked back to her chamber. She did not knock on the library door. She sat down at her writing desk. She drew out a fresh sheet. She dipped her pen. And in the small attic chamber, 3 floors above the library, Clara Bellamy stood at her window with both hands pressed to the glass, watching the road that ran south from Whitmore Hall, watching for the dust of a horse that was not yet coming, but would be soon. For 3 days Whitmore Hall lived 2 lives at once. Above the floors in the drawing rooms and the breakfast parlor and the long south porch, 14 brides walked their careful patterns. They drank their tea. They embroidered. They asked Margaret Whitmore polite questions about the chapel and the rose garden and the dates of the family portraits. Vivien Hawthorne smiled at all of them and remembered all of their names and corrected Lottie Vance when Lottie said something too plain at breakfast. Below the floors in the kitchen passage and the linen room and the back stair, a different house was moving. "He's come." Abby Turner whispered it through the crack of the linen room door on the 3rd afternoon. Eleanor was folding Clara's nightdresses with her sleeves rolled up. "Where?" "Just rid up. He's at the front door now. Mr. Coleman's taken his coat." "How does he look?" "Miss..." "His face. Abby, how does his face look?" Abby was quiet a beat. "Mean, miss. He looks mean." Eleanor folded the next nightdress slow. "Tell Mrs. Doyle I'd like a cup of tea sent up to Miss Bellamy's chamber." "Yes, miss." "And Abby." "Ma'am. Whatever happens at supper tonight, you stay in the kitchen. Don't come up. Don't come near the dining room. Don't come near the corridors." "Miss." "Promise me, Abby." "Yes, ma'am." In the front hall, Silas Hawthorne handed his hat to Coleman and did not bother smiling. "My sister. Miss Hawthorne is taking tea on the south porch, sir." "Tell her I'm here." "Yes, sir. Mr. Whitmore was hoping you would join the supper this evening, sir, as the guest of I'll Be There." "Yes, sir." Silas walked past the steward without another word. He was a tall man, thin, the kind of thin that came from anger rather than hunger. His coat was good, but it had been turned at the collar. His boots were good, but they had been mended at the heel. Coleman watched him go and kept his face still and thought, "That is a man who has come here knowing he can't afford to lose." On the south porch, Vivien rose when she saw him. "Silas." "Vivien. Walk with me." "Where?" "To the lower garden. Now." They walked. They walked past 3 of the brides and 2 of the housemaids, and they did not speak. At the bottom of the garden, by the dry fountain that the Whitmores had not run since Nathaniel's mother died, Vivien stopped and turned and gave her brother both her hands. "Tell me you brought it." "I brought it. All of it." "Vivien, I brought everything we have on the Reeds. I have testimony from 3 men in Charlottesville. I have a letter from the Ashby family lawyer. I have a note from the deacon who refused her communion. I have enough to bury her by Sunday." "Good. You're sure he won't?" "He's been gone over her since the first night, Silas. I have watched him. He don't talk to the others. He don't even pretend to. He sits at supper and he stares at the wall behind Lottie Vance, and I know he's seeing that woman in the storm." "Then why ain't he asked for her?" "Because he's a careful man. Because he wants to be told it ain't what it looks like. Because he wants permission to put her back in the corner where she belongs." "And you're going to give him that permission? Tonight? At supper? In front of every witness in this house?" Silas looked at his sister a long moment. "Viv, if this don't work, it'll work. Viv, if it don't, if he stands up at that table and defends her, what then? Then we ride home in the morning, and you tell father what you tell him, and the bank takes the cotton fields." "Vivien, I know Silas. Father will..." "I know, brother." "Then make it work." "I will." She let go of his hands. She walked back up to the house alone. In Clara's chamber, Eleanor was sitting on the floor by the window with Clara's small thin hand in hers, and Clara was crying without sound. "He's downstairs, Eleanor." "I know. He came." "I know. What are you gonna do?" "I'm gonna eat with Abby in the kitchen passage. I'm gonna stay there till the supper's done. Mr. Whitmore promised me I would not be at that table tonight, and I trust him. Eleanor. Yes, dearest. Are you afraid? Yes. Of what? Of him saying my father's name out loud at that table and changing the way 14 women look at me forever. He'll change the way they look at you anyway. They'll know by Tuesday. I know. Then what are you really afraid of? Eleanor was quiet. I'm afraid Mr. Whitmore'll get up to defend me, Clara, and something he says in temper will make him a man who can't take his words back later. Eleanor. Eleanor, look at me. Yes. That man has been taking his words back for 2 years. He came home from that frontier and didn't say a true thing to nobody until he said your name in his own library 4 mornings ago. If he gets up tonight, he's gonna mean every word he says, and he ain't gonna want to take none of 'em back. You hear me? Clara. You hear me, Eleanor? I hear you. In the dining room at 7:15, the long table was set for 14 brides. Margaret Whitmore at one head, Nathaniel at the other, and one extra place between Vivien and the wall for the brother who had ridden in that afternoon. Clara Bellamy sat at her aunt's right. She had not eaten since breakfast. The first course came and went. Vivien was charmin'. Silas was charmin'. Lottie Vance asked Silas about the roads, and Silas told her the roads were fine and complimented her gloves. Margaret Whitmore watched the brother and the sister, and her old shrewd eyes did not blink. Nathaniel did not speak much. He drank water. He cut his meat. He looked twice at the small clock on the mantel like a man timing a horse over a fence. The second course came. Silas set down his wine. Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Hawthorne. I wonder if I might raise a matter that has come to my attention. It's a matter of some delicacy. I bring it up only because I would not see a man of your standing caught unaware in his own house. The room went still. Margaret Whitmore set her glass down very, very gently. Clara Bellamy reached under the table and gripped the lace of her own dress so hard her knuckles went white. Mr. Hawthorne. Nathaniel's voice was level. If you have a matter that concerns this household, you may bring it up. It concerns a member of this household, sir, a young woman currently employed under your roof. Her name is Miss Eleanor Reed. A small sound went around the table. 2 of the brides leaned forward. Lottie Vance did not. She is the daughter, Silas continued, of a Dr. Samuel Reed, formerly of Charlottesville. Dr. Reed was 4 years ago responsible for the death of a young woman named Catherine Ashby through an act of medical carelessness so gross that he was driven from his practice, his church, and his town. He died in disgrace some months later. I bring this to your attention because his daughter is now sleeping under your roof in the company of Miss Bellamy, and because you, sir, are a man with a name to protect. Vivien's eyes were on her plate. Silas turned his glass slowly between his fingers and waited. Nathaniel was quiet a long beat. Mr. Hawthorne. Sir. You came 2 days' ride to bring me this news. I came to visit my sister, sir. The matter came to me in passin'. In passin'. Yes, sir. At what supper, sir, did this matter pass? Silas's mouth opened, closed. Mr. Whitmore. At what supper, Mr. Hawthorne? Whose table? Whose company? Tell me the names of the men who told you about Dr. Samuel Reed in passin' on your way to visit your sister. Sir, I do not see. You do not see, Mr. Hawthorne, because there was no such supper. You rode 2 days because your sister wrote you a letter at midnight on Sunday and put it in the hands of a stable boy at sunrise on Monday, and the contents of that letter were not a question of family welfare. They were an instruction. You are here at her instruction. Do not insult me, sir, by pretending otherwise. The silence at the table changed shape. Vivien's hand on her wine glass began very slightly to shake. Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Hawthorne, I have not finished. Sir, you have told me a story about Dr. Samuel Reed. You have told me half of it. The other half, which you also know, because no man rides 2 days with one half of a story without checking on the other half, is that 8 months after Catherine Ashby's death, her own brother wrote a letter confessing that another member of the Ashby family had been administering arsenic to her in increasing doses for the purpose of securing her dowry portion. The letter was witnessed by 2 ministers and a justice of the peace in Albemarle County. It exists, Mr. Hawthorne. It is a matter of record. Dr. Samuel Reed did not kill Catherine Ashby. He tried to save her, and he failed because she was being poisoned at home faster than he could treat her in his office. Silas's face had gone gray. "Sir, do you deny that letter exists, Mr. Hawthorne?" Sir, the letter has not been." "Do you deny it exists?" "I do not deny." "Then why, Mr. Hawthorne, did you not bring it to my table tonight along with the rest?" Silas could not speak. "I will tell you why," Nathaniel said. He had not raised his voice at any point. "Because you did not come to this house to bring me information. You came to bring me an instruction. The instruction was to dismiss Miss Eleanor Reed before she became a problem for your sister's marriage prospects. You did not expect me to know about the brother's letter, because you did not expect Miss Reed had told me about it herself. She told me, Mr. Hawthorne, 3 days ago, in my own library, standing up, with her name on her own tongue. Before any letter you carried in your saddlebag rode within 50 miles of my house." Vivien's wine glass slipped half an inch in her fingers, and she set it down so fast the wine sloshed onto the cloth. "Mr. Whitmore." Silas had found his voice, but it was not the voice he had ridden in with. "Sir, you will understand a young woman in my sister's position the appearance of impropriety." "There is no impropriety, Mr. Hawthorne. There is a young woman who has been carrying her father's name through 4 years of country gossip with more dignity than this room contains in its silver. The only impropriety in my house tonight rode in this afternoon on a tired horse and is presently sitting between my aunt and my dish of green beans." A sound came from the foot of the table. It was Margaret Whitmore. She had not laughed at her own table in 11 months. She did not laugh now, but she made a small noise, something between a breath and a syllable, and she pressed her napkin to her mouth, and her old shrewd eyes filled. "Mr. Whitmore." Vivien's voice, very steady, very small. "Miss Hawthorne." "My brother did not ride here at my instruction." "Miss Hawthorne, please do not." "Miss Hawthorne, please, do not lie at my table. It is the one mercy I can offer you tonight, and I am offering it." Vivien's mouth closed. Silas looked at his sister. Vivien did not look at him. Nathaniel turned then to the table at large. "There is a young woman in this household," he said, "named Miss Eleanor Reed. Some of you have seen her in the corridors. Some of you have not. She is a guest in this house under the protection of Miss Bellamy, and from this evening forward, she is also a guest in this house under my own protection. The matter of her father's reputation is by my decision, and with my solicitor's assistance, to be reopened in Albemarle County before Christmas. I expect this to be the last time the name of Dr. Samuel Reed is spoken at this table in any tone but respect. Am I understood?" 12 of the 14 brides nodded so fast their earrings shook. Vivien Hawthorne did not nod. She rose. "Margaret, forgive me. I find I do not have an appetite this evening." "Sit down, Vivien," Margaret said gently. "Ma'am." "Sit down, child. We are not done with our dinner. The pie has not come." "Mrs. Whitmore." "Sit down." Vivien sat. The dinner continued. The pie came. Lottie Vance said something about her mother's apricot preserves, and 3 of the brides answered her too brightly. Silas Hawthorne ate 4 bites and then stopped. Vivien did not eat at all. Clara Bellamy began very quietly to cry. Nathaniel did not look at his aunt. He did not look at Vivien. He did not look at any of the women he was meant to be considering for a wife. But twice during the pie, he looked at the door of the dining room as if expecting someone who was not coming in. In the kitchen passage on a stool by the bread oven, Eleanor Reed sat with a tin plate balanced on her knees and a cup of tea gone cold in her hand. Abby Turner came down the back stair, taking the steps 2 at a time, and almost fell over the cat. "Miss Eleanor." "What?" Mr. Whitmore at the table, Abby, slow down. He defended you, Miss Eleanor. He defended you in front of every soul. He told Silas Hawthorne at the table he said your father's name had to be respected at his table from this day forward. He said, Abby. He said you was under his protection. Eleanor set the tin plate down on the stool beside her. He said that. In front of all of 'em, miss. Mrs. Doyle just come from the dinin' room with the pie. She heard it from the door. Miss, he said your name out loud at his own supper table. Eleanor pressed her hand flat against her chest. She did not cry. She did not move. Miss Eleanor. I'm here, Abby. What you gonna do? Nothin' tonight. Miss, I'm gonna finish this tea. I'm gonna go up to Miss Clara. I'm gonna put her to bed, and then I'm gonna sleep, Abby, because I have not slept well in 3 nights. And tomorrow there's a woman in this house I have to have a conversation with, and I'd like to have it with my full sense about me. Miss Vivien. Yes, Abby, Miss Vivien. The next morning, Vivien Hawthorne was on the south porch by 6:30. She was already dressed. She had not slept. Her trunk had been brought down before sunrise, but she had not yet given the order to load it. Eleanor Reed walked out onto the porch at 6:45, with her hair in its plain braid and her hands empty. Miss Hawthorne. Vivien turned. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Miss Reed. May I sit, ma'am? You may stand. I am leaving shortly. Then I will stand. Vivien was a little taller than Eleanor. She used the inch. You came to gloat. No, ma'am. Then what? I came to ask you a question, ma'am, and to tell you something I think you ought to hear before you go. I am not in a mood to hear anything from you, Miss Reed. I know, ma'am. I'd like you to hear it anyway. Vivien's mouth thinned. Speak then, quickly. The horses are being brought. My question first, ma'am. Ask it. Why did you do it? Why did I do what Miss Reed? Why did you write the letter, ma'am? Why did you bring your brother 2 days' ride? You had not spoken 3 sentences to me before that night. I had not crossed your path in any room of this house. Why was I a thing you could not bear to leave alone? Vivien laughed once. It was not a kind laugh. You think I did it because of jealousy, Miss Reed? No, ma'am. No. I don't think a woman like you would do something that hard for a feelin' that small. I think you did it because you were afraid. Of you. Of what would happen to your family, ma'am, if you went home from this house unmarried. The breath went out of Vivien. Get off this porch. Ma'am, I am going. I just want you to know one thing first. What? I do not blame you. Vivien turned to face her full. Her hands were trembling. You don't what? I don't blame you, ma'am. I am 4 years older than I was when my father was buried, and I have learned in those 4 years that women do hard, ugly things for the same reason horses run into thunder. They are afraid, and there is nowhere else to put the fear. You were afraid. So you wrote a letter. I would not have done it your way, ma'am, but I have not been in your way, and I will not stand on this porch and pretend I know what it costs a woman to go home to a house that is failing. Vivien stared at her. You are telling me, she said slowly, that you forgive me. I am telling you, ma'am, that I do not need to forgive you because I am not the one you wronged. You wronged Mr. Whitmore. You lied at his table. If you have an apology to make, ma'am, it is not to me, it is to him. I will make no apology to that man. Then ride home, ma'am, and I hope your father finds another way. Vivien's hand came up. For 1 second, Eleanor thought the other woman was going to slap her. The hand stopped halfway. It hung in the air a long moment. Then it dropped. Miss Reed. Yes, ma'am. I do not know how to do what you just did. Ma'am. Stand on a porch in a plain gray dress and tell another woman she is forgiven. I did not say I forgave you, ma'am. I said I would not be the one to require it. That is the same thing, Miss Reed, and you know it is. Maybe it is, ma'am. You should hate me. I have hated more people than you will ever meet, Miss Hawthorne. I have hated the men who refused my father communion. I have hated the deacon's wife who pulled her child away from me at a market stall. I have hated a constable who would not write down my brother's letter when I brought it to him in tears. I am tired of hating people, ma'am. Hating them does not bring my father back. It does not put bread on the table. It does not sleep beside me. So I have stopped mostly, and what I have left over from stopping is enough not to spend it on you. Vivien sat down on the porch bench. She did not cry. Vivien Hawthorne did not cry in front of women, and she would not have started for Eleanor Reed. But she sat, and she put her hands flat on her knees, and she stayed there a long time. My father will lose the cotton. I know, ma'am. My brother will marry a woman he does not respect to save the house. I am sorry, ma'am. Don't be. I am anyway. Vivien looked up at her then. Miss Reed. Yes, ma'am. You should marry him. Ma'am? Mr. Whitmore. He looked at you across his own table last night with my brother's hand shaken in his lap, and he looked at you at supper the first night before any of us knew you existed, and he has been looking at you across rooms you were not in for 3 days. You should marry him. He is not a man who looks twice. He looked twice at you, Miss Reed. Do not make him look a third time. Eleanor did not answer. Vivien rose. She straightened her gloves. She gestured to her maid Posy, who had been waiting at the corner of the porch for 10 minutes. Posy, tell my brother the trunks may be loaded. Yes, Miss Vivien. The maid hurried off. Vivien turned back once at the porch step. Miss Reed. Yes, ma'am. If anyone in 3 counties asks me, I will say I withdrew of my own choosing. I will not give them the satisfaction of saying otherwise. Yes, ma'am. I would not expect you to. Goodbye, Miss Reed. Goodbye, Miss Hawthorne. By 9 o'clock the Hawthorne carriage was a quarter-mile down the south road, and Whitmore Hall was 13 brides poorer and 1 truth richer, and Margaret Whitmore was sitting across from her nephew in his study, with a cup of coffee gone cold between them. Nathaniel. Margaret. You are aware that you publicly defended a woman last night who is not on my list of guests. I am aware, Margaret. You are aware that 12 other young women in this house are presently writing letters home asking their mothers what to do. I am aware. You are aware that the only correct thing to do by the standards of this county and this state and this country is to release every one of them by Friday and call this gathering a failure. I am aware. Then are you also aware, Nathaniel, that you have not asked Miss Eleanor Reed a single question about what she might want from this? He was quiet a long beat. Margaret. Nephew? You are right. I usually am. I will speak with her this afternoon. You will speak with her this morning, Nathaniel. The girl has not had a settled hour in a week. Whatever you intend by her, she deserves to know it before noon. He nodded. He stood. In the east garden by the wall where the early summer roses had begun to climb the trellis, Eleanor was on her knees pulling weeds out of Margaret Whitmore's herb border. She had not been asked to. She had simply found that morning that her hands needed something to do that did not involve another woman's hair. Miss Reed? She did not stand. She set the weeds down. She looked up. Mr. Whitmore. May I sit? It's your garden, sir. I am asking anyway. You may sit. He sat down in the grass, not on the bench, in the grass. At a distance of about 3 feet from her, like a man who had decided he would rather get his coat dirty than sit higher than the woman he was talking to. Miss Reed. Yes, sir. I have not asked you what you want. Sir, I defended you at my table last night without asking you whether you wished to be defended. I announced to my household that you are under my protection without asking you whether you wished my protection. I have in 3 days taken a great many decisions on your behalf. Miss Reed and I have not consulted you on a single one of them. Sir, Please, let me finish. Yes, sir. My aunt has just informed me with some force that I have been treating you the way men in my position treat women in your position, which is to say, as a problem to be solved. I would like to stop doing that, Miss Reed. I would like if you will permit me to ask you what you want. She set the weeds down on the grass. She wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at him. Mr. Whitmore. Yes. That is the first time in 4 years that any man has asked me that question. I am sorry, Miss Reed, that it has taken so long. She was quiet for a long while. I want, she said slowly, a room that is mine. Yes. I want a life where I am not useful only because I am invisible. Yes. I want to matter, sir, without making myself smaller. Miss Reed. Yes. I lost a friend on the frontier 2 years ago. His name was Daniel Ames. I came home from burying him, and I have not since then wanted anything for myself. I have wanted things for the house. I have wanted things for my aunt. I have wanted things in some distant way for the men who used to work my father's land. But I have not wanted anything for me, Miss Reed, because I did not believe a man like me had any right to. Sir, I saw you walk into that storm. Yes, and something in me that had been still for 2 years moved. Mr. Whitmore. Eleanor. It was the first time he had said her given name without a title in front of it, where she could hear him say it. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she said it back. Nathaniel. He did not reach for her. He did not need to. In the upstairs window of the east wing, Margaret Whitmore stood looking down at the herb border with her hand pressed flat against her mouth. She did not call her nephew into supper that evening. She let the garden have him. By Friday morning, 12 of the 13 remaining brides had gone home. They went politely. They went with thank you notes. They went with carriages loaded fast, and faces kept smooth, because women raised in their kind of house did not weep over a man until they were 3 counties away from his front door. Margaret Whitmore stood at the top of the porch step and saw each one of them off with the same words. You are always welcome at Whitmore Hall, dear. Travel safe. Lottie Vance was the last to go. She came down the porch step in her traveling bonnet with her small carpet bag in her own hand instead of her maid's, and she stopped in front of Margaret and she set the bag down. Mrs. Whitmore. Lottie. Ma'am, I'd like to ask a favor. Ask it, child. Tell Miss Reed I said goodbye. Margaret's face did not move. I will tell her, Lottie. And ma'am, tell her I think she's the bravest woman I ever saw walk in the rain. I will tell her that too. Thank you, ma'am. The girl picked up her bag. Margaret watched the carriage roll out, and when the dust had settled on the south road, she turned to Coleman, who was standing by the door with his hands behind his back. Coleman? Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. Send for the solicitor in Richmond. Tell Mr. Hadley I'd like him here by Wednesday next. Yes, ma'am. And Coleman. Ma'am. Send word to Albemarle County, to the brother of Catherine Ashby. Tell him a Whitmore solicitor will be calling on him within the fortnight, and tell him he should bring whatever copies of his own letter he still has in his possession. Yes, ma'am. And one more thing. Ma'am, there's a young woman in this house named Miss Eleanor Reed. From this morning forward, her meals will be served at the family table. Her chamber will be moved from the 3rd floor to the blue room at the end of the east corridor. She is to be addressed by the staff as Miss Reed, and given the same courtesies as any guest of this household. Understood. Coleman did not blink. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. You don't sound surprised, Coleman. No, ma'am. Why not? Because, ma'am, with respect, anyone who has worked in this house for more than a week could see this coming from the night of the storm. Margaret almost smiled. Tell the housekeeper, Coleman. Yes, ma'am. In the small attic chamber, Eleanor was sitting on the edge of her cot, with Clara's letter on her lap, when Abby Turner burst through the door without knocking. Miss! Abby! Mr. Coleman just told the housekeeper. They're moving you to the blue room. Mrs. Whitmore's orders. Abby. You're eating at the family table, miss, tonight. Mrs. Whitmore said it herself. Eleanor folded Clara's letter with hands that had gone stiff at the knuckles. Abby, sit down. Miss... Sit down, child, on the cot, right here. Abby sat. Abby, I need you to listen to me a minute. Yes, miss. You are pleased about this. I can see you are pleased. Yes, miss. I am not pleased, Abby. The kitchen maid blinked. Miss, I am not pleased because I have not earned that blue room. I have not earned the family table. I walked into a storm, and a man fell in love with me at his upstairs window, and now his aunt is moving my belongings down a corridor I did not ask to walk. Do you understand me, Abby? This is not a thing I have done. This is a thing that is being done to me. Miss Eleanor? Hush a minute. Yes, ma'am. I am not refusing it. I am only saying I do not yet know how to be a woman who eats at that table. I have been eaten in kitchen passages for 4 years. The 2 seats are not the same width. I will need a little time to learn how to sit in the wider one." Abby was quiet a moment. "Miss?" "Yes." "You learned how to walk into a storm in front of 14 ladies. You can learn how to eat soup at a long table." Eleanor laughed short and wet. "Abby Turner." "Yes, ma'am. You are a wicked, wicked girl, and I love you." "Yes, ma'am." That night, Eleanor came down to supper in Clara's altered Sunday dress. It was dove-gray plain, with no lace at the throat. Clara had taken in the seams herself, with shaken fingers, sitting on the edge of her own bed, refusing to let any maid in the house touch the work. When Eleanor protested, Clara pressed a thin, small hand to her mouth and said, "Hush, Eleanor. You let me have this one." And Eleanor had hushed. She paused at the dining room door. She could not make herself walk through it. A footman opened the door for her anyway, and there was nothing to do then but step inside. 6 pairs of eyes looked up. Margaret Whitmore at one end of the table, Nathaniel at the other, Clara at Margaret's right. 3 empty places where the brides used to be, and one place set across from Clara with a fresh napkin folded into the shape of a small bird. Nathaniel rose. "Miss Reed?" "Mr. Whitmore, will you sit?" "Yes, sir." She sat. The footman pushed her chair in. Her own hands, when she set them in her lap, were trembling. Margaret Whitmore lifted her glass. "Miss Reed." "Yes, ma'am." "Welcome to my table, child." Eleanor's throat closed. "Thank you, ma'am." "You will find it is not so different from the kitchen passage, except that the soup gets to you a little hotter." A small laugh went around the table. Even Coleman, standing by the sideboard, cracked a smile and pretended he had not. The supper began. It was the first meal Eleanor had ever eaten at a table where no one was waiting for her to clear her own plate. After the second course, Margaret set her glass down. "Miss Reed." "Ma'am, I have written to Mr. Hadley in Richmond. He is my late husband's solicitor and a man of considerable backbone. He will be here Wednesday next. He will travel from this house to Albemarle County to begin the formal process of clearing your father's name. I would like, if you are willing, for you to travel with him." Eleanor set her spoon down. "Ma'am, he will have the legal authority, but you will have the witness. The Ashby brother will not refuse a daughter who has carried his letter on her person for 4 years. Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes, child." "You are asking me to go with him." "I am asking you to go for yourself, Miss Reed. There is a difference." Eleanor pressed her napkin to her mouth. She did not cry. She had said she would not cry at this table, and she would not. But Nathaniel saw her hand. He saw the napkin. He set his own glass down. "Eleanor, I am all right?" "Are you?" "I am all right, Nathaniel. Truly, I am only—" "You don't have to finish, Miss Reed," Margaret said gently. "Eat your supper. We can speak of it tomorrow." "No, ma'am. I'd like to finish." "Go on, then." "Mrs. Whitmore, I have spent 4 years asking folks in 3 counties to listen to me. I have written letters that came back unopened. I have stood on courthouse steps in the cold. I have begged men I would not have spoken to in any other circumstance. And tonight, ma'am, you have offered me a solicitor and a carriage and a road, and you have offered them not as charity, ma'am, but as a thing I am owed." "You are owed it, child." "Yes, ma'am." "Will you go?" "Yes, ma'am, I will go." Margaret nodded once. "Then it is settled." Across the table, Clara reached out without looking and took Eleanor's hand. They did not speak. They held hands across the cloth like 2 children at the edge of deep water. Nathaniel did not say anything. He only watched Eleanor's face the way he had been watching it for 10 days now, and his own face was the face of a man who had stopped looking at the wall behind people and started looking at the people themselves. It would be 11 weeks before Eleanor read the document that cleared her father's name. 11 weeks of letters carried by post-riders. 11 weeks of testimony from a deacon who finally remembered how to be ashamed. 11 weeks of the Ashby brothers sitting in a Richmond office across a long table from Mr. Hadley, with his hands shaken on a paper he had written 4 years before. 11 weeks of Eleanor sitting beside Mr. Hadley on 3 separate journeys saying her father's name out loud, in rooms full of men who had once said it under their breath. She did not weep on any of those journeys. She wept once alone in the Whitmore Hall library on the 11th Tuesday, when Coleman brought her the sealed letter from the Albemarle County clerk, and she sat down at the long table by the south window and broke the seal with her own thumb. The document was a single page. It said her father had not killed Catherine Ashby. It said the record stood corrected. It said his name was by the seal of the county restored. She pressed her hand flat to the paper. "I kept walking, Father." She did not say it loud. She said it the way folks say things to graves. Behind her the library door opened. Nathaniel did not speak. He did not ask if she had read it. He did not ask if she was all right. He came across the long room and he sat down in the chair beside hers, and he set his hand palm up on the long table near her elbow. She looked at the hand. After a moment, she put hers in it. That was all. For a long while, that was all. Mr. Hadley left for Richmond the next morning. The household ran a little quieter for a week. Margaret took to reading in the small parlor in the afternoons, with a book of her late sister's poetry that she had not opened in 15 years. Clara grew stronger in the early autumn light, eatin' more sleepin' through the nights, laughin' once at a thing Abby said in the kitchen passage that no one had ever laughed at before. And Eleanor walked every morning to the east garden to the bench by the wall, where the late roses were still climbing the trellis. On the second Sunday in October, Nathaniel was waiting for her there. "Eleanor?" "Nathaniel." "Will you sit?" "Yes." She sat. He did not sit beside her at first. He stood with his hands folded behind his back, the way he had stood at his upstairs window the night of the storm. "Eleanor, I have been a coward. Sir, I have been waitin'. For your father's name, for Mr. Hadley, for the right week. For some sign that the world had given me permission to ask you a question I have been wantin' to ask you since the first night. Nathaniel, will you let me ask it now?" "Yes." He sat then, on the bench, beside her, close enough that the edge of his coat brushed the edge of her sleeve. "I am not going to make you a speech, Eleanor. I am not built for speeches, and you are not built for hearing them. So I will only tell you the plain truth. Yes, I came back from the frontier 2 years ago believing I had used up whatever a man like me is given for one lifetime. I believed I had loved my friend and lost him, and that was the portion. I did not look at any woman in this state with anything but politeness. I sat at my aunt's supper table the first night of her gathering, and I looked at 14 women, and I felt nothing for any of them. And then I went to my window because the storm had broken, and I looked down into my own courtyard, and I saw a woman in a brown wool cloak walk into lightning for a stable boy. Nathaniel, I do not want you because you fit this house, Eleanor. I want you because you make this house honest. Will you marry me?" She did not answer fast. She looked down at her own hands. They were not shaken anymore. They had not been shaken for some weeks now. "Nathaniel." "Yes." "I came to Whitmore Hall expecting to remain invisible." "I know. I came with one good dress and my father's letter sewn into the lining of my cloak. I came expecting to leave by Christmas with my reputation no worse than I'd brought it and my purse no fatter." "I know. I will marry you, Nathaniel." He closed his eyes. "But I have a condition." "Anything." "You must not, sir, return to being a ghost in this house once I am beside you." "Eleanor, you will be tempted. I know you will. You are a man who has learned to disappear into himself when life gets too loud. I am telling you now, before any vow we make in any chapel, if you marry me, you will stay present in your own house. You will eat at your own table. You will look me in the eye when I speak to you. You will not retreat into your study and lock the door and call it grief. Do you understand me, Nathaniel?" "I understand you. Will you promise it?" "I promise to try." "That is the right answer." "It is. "Sir, any man who promised more would be lying, and I have been lied to enough." He laughed. It was the first true laugh she had ever heard from him. It came up out of his chest like something that had been buried in a box for 2 years and only just now found a way out. "Eleanor Reed." "Yes. I am going to kiss you." "All right." He kissed her. It was not a long kiss. It was not the kiss of a man taking something. It was the kiss of a man arriving somewhere he had not believed 2 years ago he would ever be allowed to arrive. When he drew back, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "Nathaniel." "Yes." "Your aunt is at the upstairs window." "I know." "How long has she been there?" "Since I came down." "Sir?" "Eleanor, you let your aunt watch you propose marriage." "My aunt has earned the right to watch a great many things in this house, Eleanor. This is one of them." "You are a wicked man, Nathaniel Whitmore." "I am learning." She laughed. He laughed. The laugh carried up to the upstairs window, where Margaret Whitmore had her hand pressed flat against her mouth, and the old woman who had not wept at her own husband's funeral wept a little now and called it dust in her eye when Coleman came up the stair behind her. That night at supper, Nathaniel announced his engagement. Clara cried into her napkin. Coleman, standing by the sideboard, lifted his hand to his eye and pretended he had been brushing away a fly. Margaret raised her glass and said 3 words low and steady. "It is well." The household reacted the way households react. 2 of the older housemaids said it would never last. 3 of the younger ones said it was the most romantic thing they had ever heard of. Mrs. Doyle, in the kitchen, baked an apple cake in the shape of a heart and made Abby Turner cry. Abby Turner cried anyway all through Sunday and most of Monday, and would not say what she was crying about even when Eleanor took her hands and asked her plain. The wedding was set for late spring. In the long quiet weeks between October and the first warm days of May, Whitmore Hall changed. It changed in small ways at first. A new chair was brought into the library of a softer cushion than the others and was set near the south window where the light came best. A second basket appeared by the kitchen door for the housekeeper to carry letters in, because Eleanor had begun writing to women in 3 counties she had once been afraid to send a card to. The old front gate, which had hung crooked since the war, was repaired. A new copy of Mrs. Hemans's poems appeared on the small table by Margaret's chair in the parlor, and Margaret Whitmore, who had said for 15 years that she did not read poetry, was seen with her finger moved down the page in the late afternoon light more often than she would admit. And Nathaniel. Nathaniel did not become another man. A man does not become another man in 3 months, or 6, or a year. He did not laugh easily. He did not stop waking before sunrise. He did not stop sometimes sitting in his study with the door half closed looking at a piece of paper on which he had written his friend Daniel Ames's name and nothing else. But he came down to breakfast every morning. He looked Eleanor in the eye when she spoke to him. He stayed. Once in late February, on a cold gray afternoon, Eleanor found him in the library, with the door open, sitting in his chair by the south window, his hand pressed flat to a book he was not reading. She did not speak. She crossed the room and sat down in the new soft chair beside him and took up her own book and read for an hour without a word. When she rose to leave, he caught her hand. "Eleanor." "Yes." "I was going to lock the door this afternoon." "I know." "I didn't." "I know, Nathaniel." "I wanted you to know I didn't." She kissed the top of his head and went downstairs to ask Mrs. Doyle about the Sunday roast. That was the way the winter passed. It was not a romance built on grand gestures. It was a romance built on a man who came down to breakfast, and a woman who learned how to sit at a wider table, and both of them, slow and careful, learned how to be present in the same room without flinching from it. By the first Sunday of May, the roses on the east garden trellis were beginning to bud. By the second Sunday, the chapel had been swept out, and the old chandelier above the altar had been polished by Coleman's own hand, because he would not let any of the housemaids touch it. By the third Sunday, Eleanor stood in front of the small mirror in the blue room at the end of the east corridor with Clara behind her fixing the last pin in her hair. and Abby Turner crying quietly into a folded handkerchief over by the door, and Margaret Whitmore sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap, watching the bride she had not chosen become the bride she had hoped against, all sense that her nephew would find. Eleanor. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. Aunt Margaret, from today. Eleanor's hands stopped at her hair. Ma'am, you will call me Aunt Margaret from today, child. We have done with Mrs. Whitmore. Eleanor turned from the mirror. She crossed the small room. She bent and pressed her cheek to the older woman's temple, and Margaret Whitmore, who had buried 2 husbands and 1 child and 1 sister and a country's worth of disappointments, closed her eyes and let the cheek stay there a long moment. Aunt Margaret, there you are, child. Thank you. For what? For the table. The old woman did not answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was rough at the edges. Eleanor. Yes, ma'am. You earned it. Ma'am. Now go and marry my nephew before he changes his mind and drives me to the brandy bottle. Yes, ma'am. Down the corridor in his own chamber, Nathaniel Whitmore was buttoning his coat in front of the small mirror, exactly as he had done on the night of the storm. His hand stopped at the 3rd button, exactly as they had stopped that night. He looked at his own face in the glass. This time he was not looking at the face of a ghost. He finished the 3rd button. He went down to the chapel. The chapel had been built in 1782 by Nathaniel's grandfather, who had wanted a place small enough to hear his own prayers in. It seated 40. On the 3rd Sunday of May, in the year 1817, it held 31 souls, and every one of them had come to see a woman the county had once whispered about walk down a 6-foot aisle on the arm of a steward. Coleman had asked for the honor a fortnight before. He had come to Eleanor in the library on a Thursday afternoon holding his hat in both hands, and he had stood in front of her writing desk like a man waiting for a sentence. Miss Reed? Coleman. Ma'am, with your permission, I would like to ask a thing. Ask it. Your father is gone, ma'am, and I know it ain't my place. But if you have not already chosen a man to walk you to Mr. Whitmore on the day, ma'am, I would consider it the honor of my life to do it. Eleanor had set her pen down very carefully. Coleman. Ma'am, if it ain't proper, I beg your pardon for asking. Coleman. Look at me. He had looked at her. I would have asked you, she had said, only I did not know how. The old steward's mouth had worked for a moment without sound. Yes, ma'am. Will you, Coleman? Yes, ma'am. Yes, I will. He had walked her down on the day with his back so straight, it pulled at the seams of his good coat, and his eyes had not left the floor for the first 10 steps because he had been afraid, plainly afraid that they would betray him in front of company. By the 11th step, he had lifted his head. By the 12th, he had looked at the man waiting at the altar. By the 13th, he had handed her over. Mr. Whitmore. Coleman. Sir, I am giving her to you. Yes, Coleman. Sir, I am also telling you a thing. Coleman. This is the best woman I have known in 31 years of service in this house. You will treat her as such, sir, all the days of your life, or you will hear about it from me. A small soft laugh went through the chapel. Margaret Whitmore in the front pew pressed her handkerchief to her mouth. Coleman. Sir? You have my word. Yes, sir. Then I am at peace, sir. The old steward stepped back. He sat down in the 3rd pew next to Mrs. Doyle, who reached for his hand without looking at him and held it for the length of the ceremony. The minister was a young man from the next county, a Reverend Tate, who had the sense to keep his sermon short. He spoke of the storm. He spoke plain and unornamented of the woman who had walked into it. He spoke of the man who had watched her walk and known at his own upstairs window that he had been seeing the world wrong for 2 years. He spoke of Dr. Samuel Reed by name in a chapel full of witnesses, and he said the doctor had been a good man whose name had been carried through a long valley by a daughter who had refused to set it down. Eleanor did not weep at her own wedding. She had decided some years before that she would not, and she did not. But when Reverend Tate said her father's name out loud in the chapel, her hand tightened on Nathaniel's hand, and Nathaniel covered her hand with his other one and held it there for a long beat, and that was all that needed saying. They made their vows. They were the same vows the Whitmores had made in that chapel for 4 generations. Nathaniel said his in the level, even voice he used for plain truths. Eleanor said hers a little softer, but every word reached the back pew where Abby Turner was sitting with her hands folded under her chin and her eyes shut tight against the cryin'. She had decided she was not going to do and was doing anyway. When the minister said the words that married them, Nathaniel did not kiss his bride right away. He looked at her first, just looked. The way a man looks at a woman he has been waiting to look at without urgency for a long time. Eleanor. Yes, I was right about you the first night. So was I. He kissed her. Outside, the bells of the small chapel rang. They were old bells, and they had not been rung for a Whitmore wedding in 36 years. They rang for a long time. Coleman had asked one of the stable boys to keep at the rope until his arms gave out, and the boy did, and the bells carried over the south road and the east garden and the back paddock where the black mare lifted her head from the grass and turned her ear toward the sound. The breakfast was held in the long dining room where Eleanor had once not been welcome. Margaret Whitmore presided at the head. She had ordered 3 more leaves added to the table to make room for the staff, who did not eat at the family table on any other day of the year and would not on any other day, but whom Margaret had decided would eat at it on this one. Coleman. Ma'am. Sit down. Mrs. Whitmore. Aunt Margaret, to you today. Ma'am, I. Sit down, Coleman. You have walked her down the aisle. You have earned a chair. Coleman sat. So did Mrs. Doyle. So did Abby Turner, who had to be more or less pushed into her seat by 2 of the older maids, and who spent the first 10 minutes of the meal looking at her own plate as if she suspected it of being a trick. Abby. Miss Eleanor. Mrs. Whitmore now. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. Abby, eat your cake. Yes, ma'am. The girl ate her cake. She cried into the cake a little, but she ate it. Halfway through the meal, Margaret rose. The room quieted. I will not make a speech, Margaret said. I have been at this table for 61 years. I have seen 4 weddings in this house. 2 of them were happy. 1 of them was not. 1 of them was a thing I would not speak about in mixed company, and so I will not. I have been preparing all winter to say a great deal at this table today, and I find now that I do not wish to say any of it. A small wave of laughter went around the table. I will say only this. She lifted her glass. Eleanor. Aunt Margaret. Welcome home, child. Eleanor's eyes filled. They had stayed dry through the chapel and the vows and the bells and the breakfast and the cake. They did not stay dry for that. Thank you, Aunt Margaret. Mrs. Whitmore now, Coleman said quietly from across the table. Coleman, do not start. Yes, ma'am. All of you eat. The cake is getting tired. They ate. Clara Bellamy left for her mother's house in Charleston 8 days later. She had tried in the last weeks before the wedding to insist she would go sooner, that she did not wish to be a burden in the early days of a marriage, that Eleanor would not want her thin shadow trailing through the corridors. Eleanor had taken her by both shoulders in the blue room at the end of the east corridor and said, Clara Bellamy, if you leave this house before the 2nd Sunday of June, I will not forgive you for 1 whole year. And Clara had laughed for the first time in 2 weeks and stayed. When she did go, she went well. She was thicker through the cheeks than she had been in October. She slept the whole nights now. She read books at breakfast and laughed at things at supper, and wrote 3 letters a week to a young man named Henry Shaw, whom she had met in town in March at a bookseller's, and whom she had not yet told her aunt about. She would tell her aunt about him by autumn. She would marry him the following spring in a small ceremony in Charleston that Eleanor and Nathaniel would travel down for, and she would name her first child a girl after the woman who had walked into a storm and changed her life. But that was later. What happened first was this. On the morning Clara left for Charleston, she stood on the porch step with her hands in Eleanor's hands, and she said the thing she had been holding for 9 months. Eleanor. Yes, dearest. Do you remember what I said, the night of the storm? Clara. Do you remember? I remember. I told you somebody was going to see you. And when they did, I hoped they would be worthy of the seeing. Yes. He was Eleanor. Yes. I am going home now. I want you to know I am going home a different woman than the one who came up that road 11 months ago. I came up that road in fear. I am leaving it without it. I do not know if I will ever be able to thank you for that. Clara, you don't have to. Hush, Eleanor. Hush. Let me finish. There is a thing I want you to remember, and I want you to remember I said it all your life. Yes, you did not just walk into that storm for John Tucker. You walked into it for every woman in that parlor who could not walk into it herself. You walked into it for Lottie Vance, who has gone home now to a house I would not wish on a stranger. You walked into it for Vivien Hawthorne, who was so afraid of being poor, she would have eaten you alive before she would have looked at her own fear. You walked into it for me, Eleanor, who has been afraid of every door in every house I have ever lived in. You did not know it. You did not mean to, but you did. And I am going home today because I watched you do it, and I learned late that some doors you have to open with your own hand. Eleanor could not speak. Don't cry, Eleanor. You don't cry, remember. Clara. Hush. Clara Bellamy. Yes, dearest. You were never a thin shadow. You were the only woman in that house who saw me before he did. Clara pressed her cheek to Eleanor's cheek. Write me, Eleanor. Every Tuesday. Every Tuesday. She got into the carriage. She did not look back when it pulled away. Eleanor stood on the porch step until the dust on the south road had settled, and then she went inside, and Nathaniel was waiting for her in the front hall with one hand held out, and she took it. The summer came. The roses on the east garden trellis bloomed all the way up to the second-story window. Nathaniel rebuilt the old front gate with his own hands one Saturday in late June, with Coleman holding the post and Abby Turner bringing lemonade. Mrs. Doyle taught Eleanor how to make her grandmother's apple cake, and Eleanor taught Mrs. Doyle the bread her own mother had baked in Charlottesville, and the two women stood in the kitchen with flour on their forearms and laughed at each other for an hour straight on the second Wednesday of July. A letter came in late August from Vivien Hawthorne. It was brief. Mrs. Whitmore. I am married. My husband is a man of small fortune and considerable kindness, neither of which I expected to find. My father lost the cotton fields in March, but he has kept the house. I think of our conversation on your porch sometimes. I do not yet know if I have learned the thing you learned, but I am trying. I send my respects to your husband and my regards to Mrs. Margaret. Vivien Lee. Eleanor read it twice. She wrote back the same afternoon. Mrs. Lee, I am glad of your letter. I am glad of your husband's kindness. The thing I learned was not learned in one storm, and I do not believe any of us learn it once and keep it. I forget it on Tuesdays, and remember it on Thursdays, and forget it again by Saturday. I think that is how it goes. I send my regards to your husband. The roses came in well this year. Eleanor Whitmore. She sent the letter. Nathaniel saw her seal it. Eleanor. Yes. You wrote to Vivien Hawthorne. Vivien Lee now. You wrote to her. Yes. Why? Because she wrote to me, Nathaniel. And because a woman who writes to another woman after a year of silence is a woman asking for something, and I did not wish to leave her asking. He looked at her a long moment. Eleanor. Yes. You are a better person than I am. Nathaniel. It's true. It is not true. You walked into a chapel and married a doctor's disgraced daughter in front of 30 witnesses. That was self-interest, Eleanor. I wanted you. That was not generosity. That was greed. She laughed. Then we will be a household of 2 greedy people, she said, and we will have a great deal. The autumn came. The corn came in. The first frost came in late October, and Margaret Whitmore caught a cold and refused to stay in bed, and Eleanor sat with her in the small parlor for a week, reading Mrs. Hemans's poems aloud, whether the old woman wanted them or not. Eleanor. Yes, Aunt Margaret. You have a good readin' voice. Thank you, ma'am. I have not told you that before. No, ma'am. I should have. You are telling me now, ma'am? Yes. The old woman closed her eyes. Eleanor? Yes. My nephew came home from the frontier 2 years ago, and he did not speak at the supper table for 11 months. Did you know that? I knew it was a long time, ma'am. 11 months. I counted. Yes, ma'am. He spoke at supper the first night you sat at his table. Did you know that, child? I did not know that, ma'am. He did. He said your name across the table and asked you to pass the bread. It was the most ordinary sentence in the world. I went up to my chamber that night, and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I said thank you out loud to a God I have not been on speaking terms with since 1798. Eleanor pressed her hand to her mouth. Do not weep, child. No, ma'am. I am only telling you what is so. You did not bring him back. He did that for himself. But you opened the door, Eleanor. You opened it, and he came through it, and that is no small thing. Aunt Margaret? Yes, child. Thank you for the table. You earned the table, child. We have been over this. I know, ma'am. I am thanking you anyway. Margaret patted her hand. Read me the next poem, Eleanor. Yes, ma'am. She read the next poem. The winter came in soft. Eleanor told Nathaniel in the second week of December that there would be a child by midsummer. He did not speak for almost a minute. He held both her hands. He pressed his forehead to her forehead. He said very low, Eleanor. That was all he said. That was all that was needed. The child was a girl. They named her Margaret Catherine Reed Whitmore Margaret, for the woman who had set a table, and Catherine for a young woman in Albemarle County, who had been poisoned by her own kin and who had no one to remember her name. The old Margaret held the baby in the chapel at her christening, with her hands trembling slightly and her chin held very high, and Coleman stood at the back of the chapel crying silently into the same handkerchief he had cried into on the day of the wedding. Eleanor lived a long life. She lived to see 4 children grown. She lived to see her husband become a man who laughed at supper and fell asleep over his own ledgers and forgot by slow degrees the names of the men he had buried on the frontier. She lived to see Clara Bellamy Shaw bury 2 of her own children and 1 husband, and survive it all with a straight back because Clara had learned from a woman in a brown wool cloak that some doors are opened with your own hand. She lived to see Whitmore Hall pass to her oldest son, and the front gate that her husband had built with his own hands rehung once and repainted twice, and the roses on the east garden trellis grow so thick that they had to be cut back every spring with a hatchet. She lived to see a young woman walk up the front drive in 1843 with a letter of introduction in her hand, applying for a position as companion to Eleanor's youngest unmarried daughter. The young woman was 22. Her father had been falsely accused of horse theft in Lynchburg. Her name had been spoken behind cupped hands in 3 counties. She came up the drive with her chin down and her eyes on the gravel. Eleanor saw her from the upstairs window. She came down to the front hall herself before Coleman's son could open the door. She opened it with her own hand. "Come in, child," she said. "Come in. You are welcome here." The young woman lifted her face. She was looking for a long moment at a woman whose name she had heard her mother speak in church basements for 20 years. A woman in a soft gray dress with a small silver brooch at her throat. A woman whose own hand was steady on the door. "Mrs. Whitmore, come inside. Coleman will take your bag. You will eat at my table tonight, and we will talk about the position in the morning. You have come a long way." "Yes, ma'am." "You will rest first." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." The young woman crossed the threshold. Eleanor closed the door behind her. A person can spend years being useful in other people's stories and mistake that for belonging. A person can be told in 100 small ways that her name is too heavy to carry, that her father's mistakes are her own, that the corner is the only seat the world has set for her. A person can begin to believe it. A person can begin to live as though the corner is the truth and the wider table is the lie. But it is not so. The corner is never the truth. The corner is only what folks see when they have not bothered to turn their heads. And there is no shame in standing in it, and there is no shame in walking out of it, and there is no shame in offering your hand to the next woman who comes up your drive with her chin down and her name heavy on her shoulders. Eleanor Whitmore opened the door. That is the whole story, and it is enough.